Like I said, I am a mum, but all of about 2 seconds. So I'm not actually going to talk about that at all. I'm not going to offer you any parenting advice this morning. Can anybody tell me what other day it was this week? Come on, just shout it out if you know. International Midwives Day on Thursday. So happy International Midwives Day if you're a midwife. And the official colour of midwives is purple. And when I was a student, they gave us these purple shirts and they were hideous. They were really, really stiff, and the uni said to us, "You look so smart." And really, what they were just like this big siren. So when you walked into the delivery room, everybody knew that you didn't know what you were doing and that they shouldn't hand you anything important, especially not a baby. And so there I was in my purple shirt, and this is, I'm going to tell you a story about when I was a student. And we used to follow women through their pregnancies and be on call for the birth. And I was looking after this woman. She was a Chinese woman having her third baby. And her husband kept saying to me at the appointments, "So you're going to be at the birth?" I said, "Yes, I'm going to be at the birth." "You're going to be at the birth?" "Yes." I'm thinking, does he not want me there? And he goes, "Does that mean I don't have to be there?" I said, "You better discuss that with your wife." But the day came and he was there, and the woman's walking down the corridor and she's leaning on the walls, just kind of breathing through, and her mum's there, vigorously rubbing her back every contraction, and the husband grabs me and goes, "Can she have the epidural now?" And I said, "Well, just hold on. You know, she's done this twice before without the epidural, and she's doing fantastic. Let's just hold on." And they go down to the room, and things start heating up a little bit, and he just kind of fades into the corner. Meanwhile, the woman is getting like more and more dynamic, and she's throwing herself around the room. And her mum's just there, and they're talking to her in her language, and the woman starts getting really distressed. And for a third baby, often, you know, some third babies, the women come in, it's just, and there you go. But this was not it at all. This was like, she was really fighting for it, and she started actually screaming, "I'm dying!" And I'm looking around thinking, is she dying? Like, I'm only a student. I don't really know what's happening. And she's tearing the sheets off the bed, and I'm just like in my purple shirt trying to put the sheets back in between every contraction. And it just escalates. And this is going on for like 20 minutes. I'm dying. And the midwife who's supervising me, I'm looking at her going, am I supposed to be doing something? You know, is she dying? What's happening? The midwife's like, no, it's fine. It's fine. Just wait. It's fine. And then all of a sudden, it turned into, I'm pushing! And sure enough, within about 3 contractions, the atmosphere in that room had completely changed. There was no more talk of dying. There was no more distress. There was just a beautiful baby in her arms. And the mother, the grandmother, who'd been there talking to her daughter the whole time, came over to me. She knew I was in the purple shirt. She knew I didn't know what I was doing. And she said to me, you know, I knew that baby was coming. I knew it was coming because she died. You see, the woman dies, and then the baby comes. And so there in that delivery room, she taught me something about birth that I've never forgotten. But she also taught me something about the kingdom of God that I've never forgotten, which is that life comes at a price, and that what life comes from is death. So when we go back to the beginning, I'm going to summarize Genesis 1-3. You don't need to turn there. We see that God spoke and he created life. He used his words for good, and he made man and woman. And he spoke over them and he said, this is good. And he made them to be in an intimate, eternal, significant relationship with him. And he made a garden for them to enjoy. But like every good father, he gave them boundaries. And he said to them, you can eat from any tree here in the garden. I want you to have a good life. I want you to enjoy this. But I don't want you to eat of that tree, because that's the tree of good and evil. And I want you to trust me that I know best for you. And that tree isn't going to do you good. It's actually going to bring death. But when God spoke, there was somebody else who was listening, and that's the devil. You see, often when God speaks blessing over us, the devil kind of perks his ears up. And he came whispering to Eve, And he said to her, did God really say that? You know, that's one of the things that the devil loves to do. He loves to challenge what God said to us. We can see that in his temptation of Jesus. All he did was take God's words and then just say, does it really say that? And Eve's going, I don't know. Did God really say that? Maybe, well, he did say he wants us to enjoy it. You know, maybe that tree would be good after all. He's going, you know, why don't you have a little taste? Go on. So Eve took the fruit and she enjoyed it. And she thought it was good. And, you know, women want to share good things, so she gave it to her husband. And her husband also took it, and he enjoyed it. And the devil was like, oh, that was a little bit too easy. And see, God came, and he said to them, what have you done? You know, I said don't eat that fruit. And they hid themselves, and they lied about it, and they tried to run away. And God was true to his word, and he said, actually, death needs to come now. You know, I created you for this eternal, significant, intimate life with me. But there's now this thing in between us. There's this sin, there's these lies and the shame, and it's actually affecting our relationship. And you're going to need to leave the garden. And so, just as he's heading them out of the garden, and the devil probably thought it couldn't get any better, he then pronounced curses over his children, over man and woman. And over man, he said, you're going to have to work really hard on the ground. It's going to be hard. You're not going to get much fruit. You're going to have to toil really hard. And that's going to be your lot for life. And then over woman, he said, you're going to have pain in childbearing, and it's going to multiply. Now, we see in Genesis 4, verse 1, that then Eve has her first child. And I feel like the Bible is full of understatements. And Genesis 4, verse 1 says, Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. This is the first pregnancy ever recorded. There's no Google doctor. There's nothing for Eve to reference what's happening in her body. And all there is just this growth that's coming. She doesn't know that there's anything in there. Has she been poisoned? What's happening? She doesn't have a midwife there to say, you know, labor's going to come. It's going to be painful, but you can get through it. It's going to be one contraction at a time. She's got none of that. All she's got is Adam. And he's going, you've put on a bit of weight. And then the day of labor would have hit, and she would have thought she was dying, you know. That's all she's ever known. And God had said, you know, death is going to come, and she's got this pain, and it keeps coming and coming. And she's probably grabbing Adam, going, Adam, this is it. You know, God said death was going to come. This must be it. And they're huddled together. And no doubt those words that I heard in that delivery room would have been screamed from where she was. Until all of a sudden, it would have changed to, I'm pushing. And Adam would have, right to attention, push. Men are very good at that. Push. And so it would have gone on from there. And then all of a sudden, this slippery, slimy, squishy new life would have come with a triumphant cry. And you know, Eve's first experience of death would have been that it brought life. Sorry. Because when God whispered that curse to her, it actually was him whispering his plan. It was him saying to the devil, you think you've won, but actually I've got a good plan for my children. Sorry. Women are very emotional, I warn you. Because God's love is too furious to let a little bit of death get in the way. So he took that very thing that the devil intended for evil, and that very thing that he wanted to separate us, and he took it and he used it as his method to bring new life. And so we see going on from there that this becomes a principle for God's people, and that they use animal sacrifice. They use the death of an animal to try and pay for their sin, so that they can kind of grasp at this relationship with God, to try and grasp at the intimacy that they once had in the garden. But it's a continual process because man continues to sin. So over thousands and thousands of years, millions of animals are slaughtered. And it's an attempt for us to be able to grasp hold of that relationship again. And God allowed us to use the blood of the animals to cover us. And then we get to Jesus. And so Jesus had been prophesied for many years, and they had said that the Messiah was coming. And Jesus came, and it was, he was the Messiah. And God's people, the Israelites at the time, were under oppression of the Roman Empire. So for them, the Messiah was going to come with might. The battle is not ours, it's God's. Come on, let's get rid of the Roman Empire. But actually, God had different priorities. And God often has different priorities to us. And his priority was to restore his relationship with his children and to bring back the eternal, significant, intimate relationship that he once had with them. And so Jesus grows up and he says things like, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. And he said, you don't realize that it's better for you that one person die than a whole nation perish. And then really outrageous things like, take this is my body, and eat it. Take this is my blood, drink it. This is my covenant poured out for you. And then in case his disciples didn't get all of these weird metaphors, he said to them, the Son of Man's going to be crucified, and then he's going to rise again in 3 days. But there was life on Jesus, and the devil knew it. And so the devil, he's kind of making this plan, and he's like, maybe I'll whisper in Judas's ear, and I'll get Jesus betrayed, and we can kill him. We can kill the life that God's brought. But you see, whilst the devil thought that everything was falling into his plan, really the devil was just falling into God's plan, because that was God's plan all along. So all of a sudden, Jesus is being committed, he's being trialed for a crime that he didn't even commit. And the rulers in front of him are even saying, I actually can't find any fault with him, but yeah, take him and kill him. Like the whole thing is completely absurd. But there Jesus is, and he's being crucified. And he's taken up his cross, this thing that he talked about with his disciples, and they could see now what that really was. And he's there, and he's being crucified. And he just declares forgiveness over people. And he says, it is finished. And with that, all of hell would have started celebrating because they'd killed the Son of God. But whilst they were celebrating, they would have heard something else. Followed by an earthquake. Because you see, whilst all of hell was celebrating, so was heaven. Because actually, when Jesus said, it is finished, what he was talking about was God's business. And he was talking about God's restoration of our relationship with him and God paying for the sin that had continually separated us from him. And that rip was the curtain in the temple. That was what had separated man from intimacy with God. Because God had found a way, and he had used the very thing that the devil intended for evil, and he had used it to bring his victory. So, this is an invitation for us. Because God fought for us so that we would have life. And he fought for us so that we could have that relationship back with him. If you've never heard this message before, in your mind, it might sound completely crazy. But I want you to let your spirit engage with what we're talking about. Okay? And if you know that God is calling you for the first time to respond to this, I want you to mark yourself. In about 10 minutes, you're going to have the chance to come forward. And we've got a ministry team, and we would love to pray with you, talk to you more about the gospel, and talk about the relationship that God wants to restore with you. Okay? Well, I'm going to talk about something else first, just before we finish. So I told you about this first woman who was having her third baby, and I'm going to tell you about another woman having her third baby. So she's about 18 weeks pregnant, and she takes her 4-year-old with her to the ultrasound because she wants to teach him about the new life in mummy's tummy and show him the heartbeat and everything. Only they get to the ultrasound room and there's actually no heartbeat. She's meant to be having a conversation about life with her 4-year-old, And she's sitting in a dark ultrasound room having a conversation about death. And then a year later, she has another son. But then in the years that follow, she has another 4 miscarriages, one of which cost her her tube. And I wonder how she feels about this little kind of system that we have, that death brings life. Because all it really seems to be that death brings death. You know, every time she lets down her guard again and says, okay, God, we'll give it another try, it just keeps ending in death and disappointment and frustration. So I thought, why don't I ask her? Because she's actually my sister. And she's writing a book. And I'd actually never asked her what her book was about because she's a church planter in Peru. And so I thought, well, that's plenty to write about. But she came at Christmas and I'd already been working on this message in my heart. And I asked her, I said, what's your book about? And she said, it's about transition that leads to breakthrough. It's about women in labor and how they get to the point where they can't go on and then God brings breakthrough for them. I was like, praise God that we're both trying to work through the same thing. So then I called her a few weeks ago and I said, Anna, I'm stuck. How am I supposed to stand up on Mother's Day and talk to people who have actually dealt with death that brings death when I don't know what to say? And she said to me, it's about seeds. I'll send you my book. And I'm going to try and read you a section. She's got her kids bouncing on the bed and it's all a bit crazy. So we kind of have these like popcorn conversations where it's like 2 words here. So I'm going to try and read you some of her book. So stay with me. Okay. After I lost my first son, I planted a garden. Getting my hands into the soil and working through my feelings with my hands covered in dirt seemed to be the right place to be. Into that soil, I planted flowers and many sunflower seeds. Those seeds were seeds of hope and a declaration of belief that God would bring something beautiful to flower in the literal and in my life as a whole. Hope is an essential element in being able to endure strong emotions. We have to believe that these emotions are temporary and will shift in time. Planting seeds was for me an act of hope and defiance in the face of despair and desperation. Hope and defiance. I want you to hold on to those 2 words, okay? Because the devil is going to keep handing us death. He doesn't have very many tools. He's not creative, and he uses death and lies, and he's going to keep handing us death. And so we have a choice that we can either bow down and lie down to the death, or we can look at Jesus, who didn't stay dead. And we can look at the pattern that God has set up with Jesus, and we can say that no, death is ultimately going to bring life. Okay. And I'm not just talking about babies, okay? I'm talking about jobs, talking about frustrations, I'm talking about disappointments. You might have lost people, sickness. I'm talking about those situations where it looked like it was going to bring life and then it brought something else, okay? But we see in the flower that when a flower dies, it leaves seeds. And that is something for us to take and to do something with. And so you can either bow down to the death, or you can take hold of those seeds and you can do something with them. And in Psalm 126, it says, those who sow seeds with tears will reap a harvest of joy. And you know, man would have known with his curse, because actually when God cursed woman, he gave her hope. And when God cursed man, and I wrestled with his curse for so long because I thought, what on earth is God saying to man? And man was learning, actually, that harvest takes time, that seasons take time, and that actually you don't always see fruit, and you don't see it when you expect to, but ultimately you have to just keep planting the seeds, otherwise you will die. You have to keep planting them. And so that's what God has called us to do. Okay? So we're going to have opportunity to learn this together. I'm going to get the musicians to come up. And I was going to get you to stand up, but then when I saw the room, I realized no one would be able to see me if you all stood up. So, I'm going to show you what we're going to do first, and then everyone is going to stand up, okay? So sometimes when you need breakthrough in the spiritual realm, you have to do something in the physical realm. So when I was battling with unforgiveness, I was struggling to forgive someone else for sin that they had sinned against me. God had me literally standing in my room and throwing their sin at the cross. I just stood there and just threw everything at the cross because I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't handle it. And so I believe God's given me something to teach us as a family this morning. Something physical that we're going to do. Okay, and that is, we're going to take the seeds in our hands, and I know you're going to feel stupid because we don't do this in our culture, but we are going to do it this morning, okay? You're going to take the seeds in your hand, okay, and you're going to plant it in the ground, okay? And we're going to say no, and that no is your defiance, okay? That's a no to the devil. That's a no to say, death is not the end. You haven't won. My God is bigger. He has a good plan for me. Okay, that's a no. There is life in this. And you let them go. Okay?